Day of GIDS, GIDS.net, and welcome to the first session of the day after the keynote, a session about WCF 4.5. So although I was introduced, I will only say a few words about myself. As mentioned, I'm a Microsoft MVP for Connected Systems. I wrote the WCF 4 course, so I guess I know a bit about WCF. Okay, and I also teach a lot about WCF, ASP.NET, IIS. I'm a certified Microsoft trainer. And I welcome you all to my session. I hope you'll enjoy it. I know I will enjoy it. This is not my first time speaking about WCF 4.5, and still I get excited every time I speak about this new technology. So first of all, just raise your hands. Is anyone using WCF today? Specifically not today because you're in a conference, but generally. Okay, WCF 4, anyone uses today? Okay, rest of you are using WCF, what, 3.5? So come to my session afterwards. I'll have a session about what's new in WCF 4, so you can get familiarized with the current version of WCF. But now we will talk more about WCF 4.5 that will be released later on this year, along with Visual Studio 2011 and Windows 8. And we'll talk about a couple of stuff that we'll see later on. But first, let's talk a bit about WCF as a framework. WCF, Windows Communication Foundation, is a framework for building services for connecting systems. WCF was introduced back in 2005. It was called Indigo once. It was in .NET 3, then in 3.5, .NET 4, and today we can see .NET 4.5 with the new improvements of WCF. And let's just dig into my first question of the day. How many people here like WCF? Okay, that's about the same ratio as the rest of the world. About 60% of the people in the world don't like WCF. Now, why do they don't like WCF? Mainly because of one small thing called WCF configuration. Has anyone ever tried to configure a configuration file for an endpoint? Yeah, configure a binding configuration, service behavior. Did you enjoy that? Yeah? Who said yeah? Oh man, you're unique, okay? Because most people do not enjoy configuring WCF. I mean, yeah, basic HTTP binding is quite simple, but when you start to use WS HTTP binding, when you start to use reliable sessions, or when you start to use security, you get the feeling that WCF is fighting against you and not alongside you. You can even see people all around the world tweeting about it. There's a special website called I Hate WCF. And even yesterday I saw a tweet that someone wrote, WCF is going to get me fired. So a lot of people don't like WCF, mainly because of the configuration. Okay, and usually that's how I look when I start to configure WCF. I guess that some of you have the same face when they start to work with WCF configuration and doesn't understand why things don't work as they expect, right? Because we usually tend to write the service names wrong. Has anyone ever developed a service, ran it, checked the endpoints, and saw that it doesn't use the endpoints they configured, just to find out they didn't write the name of the service properly in the configuration file? Yeah, how many had this in the last week? Okay, me too. We get configuration files errors because we write the wrong names in the service. We write wrong names of bindings and wrong names of configuration. We copy-paste configuration from one project to the other, and we miss a couple of things like copying the binding configuration from the previous project. In WCF 4, we did have some new stuff that were developed. I will talk later in the WCF 4 session about it, stuff like automatic configuration, default endpoint, that sort of stuff. But in WCF 4.5 and mainly in Visual Studio 11, we got a whole lot of good things in the configuration files to allow us to create a service more easily. So first of all, in Visual Studio 11, we have IntelliSense in the configuration file for our WCF services. What does it mean? First of all, when you try to enter the name of the service, you will get an IntelliSense that allows you to select any of the service classes that you declared in your code. Okay, so that's cool. You also have a chance to select some of the default services that are configured in WCF, such as a discovery proxy, a routing service, that sort of stuff. You also have IntelliSense for the contract name. So after you select your service name, the IntelliSense will automatically show you in the endpoint the list of contracts that you can implement, whether it is a contract that came from your code, okay, even from a different assembly that was loaded into the project, or maybe even a contract such as the iMetadata Exchange, the MEX contract. Anyone ever use the MEX endpoint? MEX endpoint? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So we have IntelliSense for binding types. No need to remember how to write basic HTTP binding, although most of us do remember. But remember, the B in the first letter is lowercase because that's how we write XML. And when we copy paste, we simply forget to do that, and we write basic HTTP binding with an uppercase B, and nothing works, right? And in WCF 4.5, we have IntelliSense for that. We don't have to select it anymore, to write it anymore. We also have IntelliSense for binding configuration. So if you create a binding configuration, for example, who here wrote a binding configuration in the last week? Okay, usually we do that to increase the maximum message size, right? The max received message size. So if you write such a binding configuration, you don't have to copy paste the name anymore to your service endpoint. You just write binding configuration equals, and you get IntelliSense with a list of all the binding configurations that are defined in your config file. And we also have it for behavior configuration. So if you have a service behavior or endpoint behavior to declare MEX or to declare debug settings, to declare credentials, you simply enter that service behavior, go to your service definition, write behavior configuration equals, and you get an IntelliSense for that. We'll see that in a moment in Visual Studio. You also have tooltips in Visual Studio 11. So when you move your cursor over some settings that related to WCF, such as the binding or the address or the binding configuration, you get an IntelliSense telling you what you need to write there. And we also have one important tool, validations. Finally, when you compile your code, your config file, whether it's a web config file or an app config file, will be validated to make sure you wrote the things properly. And if you copy pasted it from another project and you notice that the service name was written improperly, you will compile your project and you will get errors because there are validation errors in the configuration file. You don't seem to be amazed for some reason. Configuration, validation, people, okay? So that's one easy thing about configuration in WCF 4.5, and we'll see that in a moment in a demo. But by the way, this is not a WCF 4.5 feature, it's a Visual Studio 11 feature. Meaning, if you are going to install .NET 4.5 on your machine and try to use, I don't know, Visual Studio 2010 for that, I'm not even sure it will work, you won't get the validations. Because the validations are for Visual Studio 11. So if you use Visual Studio 11 for .NET 4 projects, WCF4, you will also get those features of IntelliSense. Okay, so if even you're not going to move to .NET 4.5 yet, but you're going to install Visual Studio 11, you will get all those options that we saw. Okay, so that's one thing that is new in WCF 4.5 and Visual Studio 11. The second thing that is new in WCF 4.5 is how WCF handles secured endpoints. Anyone uses IIS today for the project? IIS, Internet Information Services? Yeah, about a third of the people. So when you define endpoints in web projects, you need to make sure your IIS is set according to the security definitions of your service. For example, if you're using a secured service that has, say, Windows authentication for one of its endpoints, you also need to set Windows authentication in IIS, okay, when you use transport security. So for example, in WCF4, there isn't an error in the slide, it's WCF4. When you use, for example, basic authentication and Windows authentication in your IIS, your configuration will look like so. You'll have two secured endpoints, for example, one that uses, one that uses basic authentication and another one that uses Windows authentication. And if you want to have an endpoint that is not using transport security, it's not using SSL, but still it uses Windows authentication because we're moving tokens, so it doesn't need to be encrypted. Okay, So if we want to define another endpoint that uses Windows authentication with no SSL, we need to define a third endpoint. So if we simply want basic authentication, Windows authentication, over secured and unsecured endpoint, we need at least 3 endpoint definitions. And why can't it be automatic in WCF4? Because it's not implemented, okay? If you need any endpoint that is not a simple HTTP endpoint in IIS, you need to configure everything from scratch, right? Well, in WCF 4.5, things got changed a bit. So first of all, we have a new option when we set the client credential type. I don't know if you can see it from the back. I'll tell you what's written there, and we'll see it in a second. When we set the client credential type, we can set it to inherited from host. WCF actually looks at the configuration that you've set for IIS, and it takes all of that configuration, and on a single endpoint, it can expose multiple security settings. Okay? So instead of 3 endpoints, I only need to define 2 endpoints. Okay? And if you're using no special security features, for example, you simply use SSL plus basic or plus Windows or plus certificate, you can define 1 endpoint, and you can actually define 0 endpoints because WCF allows automatic configuration over HTTPS. So what does it mean? When we define endpoints in IIS, first of all, we can define multiple authentication types in a single endpoint. We don't need an endpoint for basic, an endpoint for a basic authentication, I mean. We don't need an endpoint for Windows authentication in addition, and if you have a certificate authentication, that will be a third one. We don't need that. Okay, from now on, WCF allows you to set your credential type to inherited from host, and it will take 1 endpoint and apply all the configuration, all the security configuration you've done for that endpoint. Another thing is, from now on, you have default endpoints for HTTPS, meaning I don't need to define any new endpoints if I'm going to use HTTPS. In WCF4, I'll remind you, if you had HTTP and HTTPS endpoints, you'll have to start defining the endpoints on your own. People here who are using WCF4 are accustomed to have clean web config files without any configuration at all. Well, when using HTTPS, they have to write their own configuration. In WCF 4.5, you can leave those configuration files empty. Even if you have HTTPS endpoints, they will be created automatically. And if you want to change how they are created, you can simply set the protocol mapping section and apply your own binding configuration. If people are here not familiar with the feature of protocol mapping and automatic configuration, join me in my WCF4 session later on today. I will talk about these features and how they are implemented in WCF. Okay, so if you feel a bit out because you're using WCF 3.5, just remember we will be talking about this later this afternoon. Okay, or maybe it's before lunch even. So what other mess got cleaned up in WCF? We saw we had IntelliSense, simpler configuration, less configuration for IIS. Does anyone identify what this is? What does it look like? I know it's a bit small, but we've all seen it a couple of times a day. Okay? What does that look like to you? WCF configuration of which side? Server or client? Client. This is the auto-generated, this is the auto-generated configuration when you add a service reference to a service. So even if you have an endpoint, a single endpoint with a basic HTTP binding with no special binding configuration in WCF, when you add a service reference in your client-side configuration, you get a whole bunch of settings that are actually the default settings of WCF. What do we do usually? We delete them. We just go ahead and remove all of them, and then when we update the service, what happens? They come back. Okay? So either we give up, either we delete them all the time, or we just switch to WCF 4.5, because in WCF 4.5, they're simply gone. Okay? So for example, if I had those 3 endpoints from before that define security, okay, basic HTTP, basic authentication, Windows authentication, I simply get 3 minimal binding configuration that has nothing else other than the things I've changed from the default. So if I should have, for some reason, created a basic HTTP endpoint with no configuration at all, my client-side configuration will be clean of any settings. So that is something that is good. Okay, let's see a bit of these features. And for that, I'm moving from my machine to a remote machine that has Windows 8 on it. Okay, so first of all, how many people here already installed Windows 8? How many people here? Oops, my mic went dead. Oh, okay. How many people here are using Windows 8 for their testing? Okay, a couple. You can download it for free for now, at least until it's in release. And I'm using Visual Studio 11. So first of all, if this is the first time you're seeing Visual Studio 11, don't be alarmed. It's not that I'm missing colors from my screen. Visual Studio 11 has changed the theme of the IDE. Okay, it's no longer colorful. It's monochromatic. Okay, although they use some blue over there. So everything is now black and white. Okay, let me just open some menus to get you familiarized. It's working on a VM, so it's a bit slow. Be patient. Be extra patient. Extra patient. I'm going to strangle my machine in a single minute. Come on, you can do it. Any questions in the meanwhile? No? Well, my machine is not responding. You know what you do when Visual Studio is not responding, right? What do? We kill it. Let's just start over again. This is why they call it beta version. Okay. I think, oh, the menu is open. So as you can see, everything is in black and white. Yeah. Don't open free Visual Studios on a machine that has only 1 gig of memory. Okay, it should be all right in a second. Visual Studio is excited. It's the first time it's being presented in GIDS. Or was it shown in the keynote? No? Okay. First time in GIDS, Visual Studio is excited. Thank you. So instead of working against Visual Studio, let's work with it. Okay, so what I have here is a simple service host. Okay, I have here a service that I built, a simple service that does actually nothing. Let's give it a second to open up. Wow, my machine is slow today. It's probably something to do with the jet lag. I came to you from Israel with 2.5 hours behind you, so my machine is a bit jet lagged, so it will take a couple of seconds. Come on. Please, 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 please walk. Have you seen the new Task Manager in Windows 8? That's what happens when I threat my machine to use Task Manager on it. It starts working. By the way, every time your machine starts to hang, threaten it. It works. Okay? Threaten to strangle it, to reboot it, to activate the Task Manager, to restart it. It usually works. Only this time it doesn't. Okay. Yeah, that was the new Task Manager. Work, god damn you. Okay, you know what? Maybe we'll give it a second to work and then we'll start using it. Ah, okay. So as you can see, my service is doing absolutely nothing. Okay, but I don't want to show you my service. I want to show you my service configuration. So I will go to my app config if Visual Studio allows me. And what I want to show you is how I write everything in configuration without using copy pasting, all by just using the IntelliSense of Visual Studio. So just let me first close the new Visual Studio open that probably causes all of this performance degradation. Come on, close. Pretty please. This is in beta. Sorry, folks. Those stuff happens. At least I don't get a blue screen. Close. Don't worry, we have another half an hour. That should be suffice for Visual Studio to open the app.config file, right? We still have a lot of things to talk about, so come on. Last chance before I move on. Okay, where's the kill command? Use TCP endpoints. TCP endpoints, okay. HTTP endpoints. Oh, most of you, okay. MSMQ, anyone? Okay. UDP? No, because there's no UDP in WCF, right? Okay. So let's talk a bit about HTTP. Duplex communication in HTTP. Anyone uses WS dual HTTP binding? No, right? WS dual HTTP binding is the only way we know today to have duplex communication in WCF. How does it work? It actually creates two channels, one from the client to the service and one from the service to the client. Well, that's not exactly duplex HTTP. That's dual HTTP, okay? To create real duplex communication over HTTP, we don't have any way of doing that because HTTP is stateless. It doesn't allow us to do any duplex communication on the HTTP channel, okay? This is by design. It's a request response. You send a request, you get a response, that's it. If you want to do something that looks like duplex, you usually do it by either using pooling or long pooling. So either you go every couple of seconds and ask the server, is there anything new? No? Okay, I'll get back to you in a couple of seconds. Or we're using long polling, which means we connect to the service and we wait and wait and wait and wait. And after a couple of seconds, say 15 seconds, 20 seconds, half a minute, we get disconnected because of a timeout, and then we just reconnect again. Okay, that's how we use mostly duplex communication in web browsers. Okay, when we do JavaScript and we want to get updates from the server, we usually do long polling. There's actually a framework for that that you can download from the web. So periodic polling, long polling, these are nice features, but there are workarounds because we don't have real duplex communication in HTTP, and therefore we don't have real duplex communication in HTTP in WCF. Okay? It can cause many, many issues. For example, if you're using periodic polling, you'll have high latency because you only check updates every couple of seconds or maybe even a minute, and you'll probably get the updates that were sent about half a minute ago, and you only got it now because only now you checked it. Okay? So duplex communication in HTTP is problematic, but we do have a solution for that, and that solution comes to us from the new features of HTML5. Okay, HTML5, other than the HTML tags that were added, also added a bunch of new technologies, such as WebSockets. WebSocket is a new way of communicating in HTTP. It is basically a bidirectional TCP channel that allows you to have full duplex over HTTP. So you can use an HTTP channel in your application, in your browser, connect to your service, and allow on that HTTP channel duplex communication between client and server. Okay? It supports even cross-domain calls, so you can even connect from a browser that downloads a page from one site and use it to connect your WebSocket connection to a different site. Okay? It doesn't have the cross-domain so the cross-domain problems that we usually have in JavaScript. Now, WebSocket is not supported in every browser because it's still being concluded on how that protocol will work. It said it will take a couple of more years until WebSocket is finalized, but it is supported in Chrome. If you have Chrome installed on your machine, anyone uses Chrome today? Yeah? Okay, it is implemented in Firefox. If you're using IE, Internet Explorer, it is being used in IE 10, which is in Windows 8. And of course, it is being used in WCF 4.5. So now we have the ability to create endpoints that have duplex communication over HTTP on a single channel. We don't need the dual channel anymore. Now, because standardization is still in progress, do expect some changes in the future. For example, there were some changes between the developer preview of WCF 4.5, which was released last year, and the consumer preview, which was released 2 months ago. Okay? So I actually had to change the code here to make it work before the session. So what do we have in WCF 4.5 relating to WebSockets? So first of all, WebSockets allows us duplex communication using SOAP. Okay, so it's not like the web APIs, if you're familiar with that. It's not RESTful calls. It's SOAP over HTTP, just like basic HTTP binding, WS-HTTP binding. It uses SOAP, or if you want it, it can use plain text, mainly to work with browsers, because browsers and SOAP don't go together that much. Okay. If we want SOAP, there is a new binding that we can use. It is called net HTTP binding. So instead of using basic WS HTTP, we can use now net HTTP binding, which allows us to use sockets over HTTP. If you're using a browser to connect to your service and you want to send plain text, not SOAP, you can use either a custom endpoint, a custom binding, sorry, a custom binding that uses WebSockets, or just download the NuGet package called Microsoft.WebSockets, and it will create that custom endpoint for you. Okay, you don't have to do anything special for that. Once you download that package, you get a service that you can derive from called WebSocket Service. WebSocket Service provides you with methods such as onOpen, onStop, onMessage. Okay, so you can use it to get messages from the client. You can use it to send messages to the client. Just derive from that service and implement your own code. I'll show you in a couple of minutes how it's done. Okay? If you want to send messages to the client, simply use the send method that is implemented for you and send a stream of text to the client. In future versions of WebSockets, we'll probably also be able to send a stream of bytes. So if you want to send an image or some sort of binary file, you will be able to do that, just not currently. Okay? So WebSockets, a new transport technology for WCF 4.5. Now let's talk a bit about UDP. I ask the question and you'll answer, okay? In WCF 3.5, do we have UDP for WCF 3.5? No, right? Well, the answer is no, but there is a sample from Microsoft that shows you how to do that, how to create a UDP channel and the UDP activation for IIS. WCF4, those of you who use WCF4, do we have UDP in WCF4? Yes, no? Yes, mixed answers, because the answer is no, we don't have a UDP binding that we can use out of the box. This is the sample that Microsoft wrote back then. But those who said yes will probably say, but there is discovery in WCF4, right? So if we have discovery that uses UDP, and for those of you who are not familiar with WCF4, come to my session. I will talk a bit about UDP and discovery. We have discovery services that use UDP, but we don't get those UDP bindings to our use because they are internal to WCF. Okay? Don't you like how Microsoft uses internal for some of their classes, and it just kicks the hell out of the fun of using WCF because everything is internal and you can't use it, right? So when I need to ask about WCF 4.5, can you guess the answer? The answer now will be, yeah, we do have UDP bindings in WCF 4.5. Okay? So what do we get by using UDP transport in WCF 4.5? First of all, UDP transport are one-way transport by nature. Okay? Meaning I can send a message, I don't need to wait for it to return, I don't even need to wait to get some sort of an acknowledgement. Okay? In TCP, for example, if I use a TCP binding which is one way, at least I get an acknowledgement that the message was received by the server. And if the server is down, I can wait a long time for that acknowledgement to come, and if it doesn't come, I will get an exception. That is not really one-way communication. One-way communication is fire and forget. Okay, I'm sending the message, I'm forgetting about it. WCF 4.5 and UDP actually support that method. I'm sending the message, I don't even care if it was received or not. Okay, I'm not waiting for an acknowledgement. If the service is down, the client will still be able to send that message. It will just go nowhere. Okay, so we have one-way communication. There is also a support for two-way communication. It's simply 2 channels of UDP implemented behind. We even have multicast messages. So you can send one message from your client and have it received by all the services that are listening to UDP endpoints. Okay, so if you have, for example, a bunch of, say, cameras that are connected to your network and they use WCF 4.5 for some reason, then you can have UDP endpoints on them, listening to the network, and with one command from the network, you can shut them all down, start them all up, shift the direction, start recording, stop recording, that sort of stuff. Okay? There are a few limitations to UDP in WCF 4.5. First of all, it's text encoded. You can't use binary encoding in UDP. Okay? Not without writing your own code. It doesn't support sessions. So it's like HTTP in that way. It doesn't have any sessions. There is no security in UDP, okay, unless you want to implement your own. There's no transport security. There's no message security for UDP. And there is no duplex UDP connection. Okay, there is a request response, but there is no duplex feature for WCF 4.5 in UDP. Okay, it might get changed in the future. Actually, I don't know their intentions of implementing that. A few things that are also new in WCF 4.5. So first of all, let's talk a bit about the client side. Client side is always neglected in WCF for some reason. Everybody's talking about the server side, but there is a client side in WCF. So first of all, how many of you are using channel factories today instead of generated proxies? Okay. Actually, if you didn't know, proxies use channel factory behind the scene. Okay. So underneath, there is channel factory everywhere. The problem with channel factory is if you're using your proxies in the wrong way, your channel factory will be created every time you create a proxy. If using the right way means that you use a configuration file and you don't define the proxy with the binding in the constructor. Okay, if you're using a configuration file to get all the definitions from it, the proxy will cache that channel factory. If you're using a different constructor other than the default, it will create the channel factory every time, again and again. But in WCF 4.5, you can instruct the proxy how to generate the channel factory. So you can tell it, I'm not going to change anything, please cache the damn thing, okay? Instead of creating it over and over. So even if you're using a constructor that doesn't use the configuration file, you can still imply it to the proxy that you want it to be configured. Some other things that are new in WCF 4.5. So first of all, this is an extremely important feature that was fixed in IIS. Who here uses IIS for their host? A couple of you raised their hands before. How many of you are using ASP also in that IIS? Okay. Just in case you didn't know, if you use WCF 4, 3.5, doesn't matter, in IIS, and you're using streaming, that doesn't actually work. Okay? Streaming in WCF over IIS is actually buffered. This is because of ASP.NET. Okay? We can blame ASP.NET. We're all WCF programmers, so ASP.NET is a piece of, sorry, I'm censored. In WCF 4.5, it was solved. I'll show you in a minute WCF 4 and WCF 4.5, and I'll show you what it means to stream over IIS in WCF 4 and how it was solved in WCF 4.5. It's very pleasing to know that they solved this bug because a lot of people chose not to use IIS because of it. Another thing for self-hosting. In self-hosting, we usually had in WCF 4 compression only for text encoding. In WCF 4.5, we have compression for binary encoding. Okay, so that's also new. Let's see some of these improvements, and please cross your fingers, hoping my machine works. Okay, so let's just see a couple of demos. First of all, for the configuration part. Okay, so as you can see, this is a configuration demo I wanted to show before, and I'll just put it in comments and I'll show you how to create it manually. Okay, and if it works too slow, I'll just skip it because we have 10 minutes left and I want to save some time for questions. And I'm seeing that my Visual Studio is just crashing today. If you want, we can have a rerun of the session during lunch if you want to see the code. By the way, all the code is online. You can go ahead after the session, download it, and try it on your own machines on your Visual Studio 11. I see my machine is just not working. So let me just move in the meanwhile to my machine and show you a demo of streaming. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to show you streaming mode in WCF4. I'm going to upload a 150, I think it's 150, maybe it's more, a large file into a WCF service in IIS. Okay, and what we're going to see is the time it took from which the client started uploading the file, the time ASP.NET caught that file, and the time the WCF service caught that file. And we're also going to see how much memory my machine had when I first started uploading the file and when the file was uploaded into WCF. And the things that we will see in a couple of seconds when it finishes, it will take a couple of seconds. This is not a bug. This is how it works. It takes a couple of seconds to upload the file. Okay. We can see that currently I have about 2 gigs of available memory. I started the upload at 11:18 and 38 seconds. And my machine, I think the recording will just pause and fast forward it afterwards. Come on, another couple of seconds. It's a large file. I think it's 500 megs or so. Let's see. It's a 300 megabyte file, and it crashed because it had the timeout. Let's do it again. I think my machine is too hot. Actually, that could be the reason. Just wait for it to create the file, and once it's ready, you can't hear it, but I'm standing near my laptop, and the fans are just going haywire. I think the machine is about to crash any second now. Something to do with the air conditioning. I'm not kidding. My machine seems to be warming up quite a lot. Yeah. Should take a couple of seconds if everything works fine. Any questions for now? Come on, sure someone here has a question about WCF 4.5. Raise your hand, ask your question. I'll pay you. No? Okay. The CPU are automatically lowering themselves to the minimum. Okay, so we can see a couple of things here. So first of all, I started with 2.1 gigabytes. And when the WCF service received that message, I had 2 gigabytes free. Okay, if you can subtract the one from the other, you see it's about 150 megs. Okay, about that size. And you can see also that I started uploading in 11:20 and 59. By the time ASP.NET got the message, it was 11:20:59. So ASP.NET immediately received the first streamed chunk. But WCF got that message only about 15 seconds later. Okay, those 15 seconds are the time that ASP.NET took to buffer the file. So ASP.NET received the stream, buffered it first in memory, then on disk, and then loaded it from the disk and sent it to WCF. So streaming in WCF4 over IIS doesn't actually work. Okay, now cross your fingers, both hands and feet, and we'll try to do that in WCF 4.5. Okay, same code, same file, 150 megabytes, but this time I'm using a WCF 4.5 and IIS 8. Okay, the fix has nothing to do with IIS 8, but still it's nice that we have a newer version of IIS. And we'll just create the file for a second. Okay, and we are starting the upload. We are starting the upload. Is everyone crossing your fingers? The fingers? Yeah. Both hands and legs? Okay. So upload is starting. Starting. Please show me the time. Give it a second to run in the background. Hope it doesn't crash. And I'll just show you another set of new features in WCF 4.5 because we don't have much time, but I do want to go over some of the features. So first of all, has anyone had a chance to see C#5, the use of the async keyword to write async services, async code? Yeah, okay, so WCF 4.5 uses the new async keyword and uses the task type from TPL, the task parallel library, to create WCF services. So you create async services quite easily today. You can generate the service code in your client side, and it will generate methods that return task instead of an iAsync result. Okay. We also have new transport defaults for TCP and name pipes to increase the usage of CPUs. Okay. Today, the defaults are multiplied by the number of cores in a machine, so you can have more high-density scenarios if you have a lot of messages. If you're using ASP.NET compatibility mode, anyone here uses ASP.NET compatibility mode in IIS? No? Okay, one. Okay. So just be aware, in WCF 4.5, ASP.NET compatibility mode is turned on by default. Previously, it was turned off. Now it's turned on by default. If you start a new WCF 4.5 application project, you will get that setting set to true. So don't forget to change it to false if you don't want compatibility mode. An additional option, in addition to create your own configuration file or create your service host and initialize it, you can create a method, a static method called configure in your service class and use it to configure the host. Once you start your host, the host will search for that static method in your service class and will simply call it, and you will be able to configure your service host from your own service code. Okay, it's nice. I don't like it because it doesn't correlate with the architecture of WCF, which means separate your host from your service, but people tend to love it for some reason. And of course, Windows 8, WCF 4.5 go together. You can create WCF clients if you're using Windows 8 Metro style applications, basic HTTP binding, TCP, and WebSockets in the future. Let's go back to the demo and see what happened. God damn it. I will bring ice to cool my machine for the next session. So we have 1 minute left. I'll just hope that the demo runs because I want to show you the cool features of the streaming in WCF 4.5. And this time we are ready for questions. So questions, anyone? No? Okay. Applause in a second. You know what? If this works, give your applause to Visual Studio 11 for working. Okay? Maybe we should start with the applause. Maybe it will make it work. Come on, you can do it. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. You see, it works. Yeah. Actually, the microphone catches the... no. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Come on. Please. Pretty please. I'll tell you what's going on, what will be happening. You will see that the memory doesn't change, okay, meaning nothing is getting buffered. And you will see that the time ASP.NET receives the message and the time WCF receives that message is the same time. Because the minute ASP.NET receives the first chunk of data, it passes it on to WCF. Okay? The reason I'm not be able to show that probably is because my machine is just warming up too much and my CPUs don't work to the best of their ability. I have 4 and they're still not working. So I guess for next time I'll just increase the timeout. Okay, we'll give it another shot here in the background. Ah, man, timed out. Okay, maybe during the break I'll have a chance to show you how it works, but it does work. Okay, so to conclude, WCF 4.5 works a lot about simplicity, okay, about new features and about ways to improve your overall performance of WCF. And if you want to learn more about WCF, you have a couple of blogs that you can read about WCF, And please, the product manager of WCF wanted me to tell you there is a special user voice website for WCF where you can write your own suggestions for WCF, things you want to see in future versions. So please go into that site, tell them I sent you. No, it's not necessary. And just write what you want WCF to have in next releases. Okay? So thank you for your time. I'm sorry my machine has been warming up, but maybe I'll be able to show you the demo if you come to my WCF4 session. Okay, maybe I'll do a recap of the previous session. I hope you enjoyed the session. I'm sorry for the problems, but it all works, I promise you. And the session is online. Okay, you can download the session from bit.ly/Geats2012. All the sample codes, if you have Visual Studio 11, you can just install it, try the samples, and you'll see that everything works. Okay, so thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed. If there are any questions, I'll be here for the next couple of minutes. Okay, so you can just hop by and ask everything you want to learn about WCF 4.5. And I'll see some of you in my next session about WCF 4. You can do the applause now.